Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on competency-based education, a discussion with educators and leaders, hosted by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Non-Public Education in the Office of the Deputy Secretary. My name is Maureen Dowling, and I'm the Director of the Office of Non-Public Education, or ONPE as we say. ONPE is the department's liaison to the non-public school community, including private independent, faith-based, and homeschools. As a former school teacher and principal, I'm delighted to join fellow educators and school leaders from both private and public schools today to engage in a conversation about competency-based education. Competency-based education, or CBE, incorporates mastery of content, personalized learning, flexible pacing, measurable and specific learning targets, and a variety of pathways for students to demonstrate competencies. CBE is worthy of our time and attention as we consider educational equity and ensure that all students achieve academic success. In the report, Equity and Quality in Education, Supporting Disadvantaged Students in Schools by the Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the following statements are included. Quote, school failure penalizes a child for life. The student who leaves school without completing upper secondary education or without the relevant skills has fewer life prospects. The same child is also less likely to take up further learning opportunities and less able to participate fully in the civic and democratic aspects of modern societies. End quote. Thus, identifying evidence-based, proven education practices and programs is critical to both maximize our children's potential and ensure a truly democratic civic society. This webinar will provide a brief overview of competency-based education, describe how educators and leaders are implementing it in classrooms, schools, and school systems across the U.S., address why public and private school educators and leaders are considering transitioning to competency-based education, and highlight some research on the impact of competency-based education on student learning outcomes. And let me just note quickly at the start, the U.S. Department of Education does not endorse any individual, enterprise, product, or service, nor mandate or prescribe practices, models, or other activities described in this webinar. The opinions expressed by our panelists do not necessarily reflect the positions or policies of the department. At the same time, though, the department does spotlight effective and innovative educational practices, and that is what we are doing via this webinar today. I'm going to bring up a slide that includes the names of our panelists. Today, I'm so pleased to be joined by Mark Siegel, Assistant Head of School, the Delphian School in Sheridan, Oregon. Kareem Farah, co-founder and CEO of Modern Classroom Project. And Dr. Jenny Gatto, Deputy Superintendent of Schools, Westminster Public Schools, Colorado. We've asked each panelist to speak from his or her own experience as a teacher, a school leader, as a systems leader, and their journey to adopting the principles and strategies of competency-based education. We will also provide time at the end of the webinar for questions, and we encourage you to send your questions via the chat in the chat feature of this webinar. But before we begin our panel discussion, I want to welcome U.S. Deputy Secretary of Education, Cindy Martin, who will provide opening remarks. Deputy Secretary Martin is no stranger to the classroom, having started her career as a teacher and subsequently becoming a school principal and later superintendent of San Diego Unified School District, where she led efforts that improved academic outcomes for students. She has brought authentic, practical, and impactful education experience to the department, and we are so pleased that she could join us today. Deputy Secretary Martin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I really love working with you and your whole team, and I'm so glad we can do this webinar. As you said, I bring my years of experience to this work, and when you told me the topic for today, competency-based and how do we design innovative systems that actually deliver for students with equity at the center of all of it, it's right up my alley. It's what I spent my entire 34-year career in education doing. I spent 17 years as a classroom teacher before becoming a principal at an inner city school in San Diego, and then ultimately becoming superintendent there, which is the role that I did for 8 years before coming to Washington, D.C. to become Deputy Secretary of Education. So it's an honor for me to serve in the Biden-Harris administration alongside our Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona. And when I think about all of the times that I've been able to implement educational programming that deliver on equity, and equity is very simply, to me, giving students what they need, when they need it, and the way that they need it. And that includes challenging students who need to be challenged. That means supporting students who need support. That means questioning traditional educational models that aren't delivering for students. And it means raising the bar for students. And our whole initiative is Raise the Bar. This administration is committed to figuring out what it takes to improve student outcomes. And that's why we've initiated Raise the Bar, Lead the World. It's really our public commitment to our nation's students, to their teachers, to families, and it's based on years of what we know works. The problem is, if we know what works in education, if we're not doing it every day for every child in every corner of our country, then that's on us as the adults. So we've developed Raise the Bar to include achieving academic excellence for every student, boldly improving learning conditions for each student, and creating pathways for global engagement. And that also includes increasing college affordability and completion. It is based on years of what we see as working. And so if we're going to raise the bar, and we're going to figure out how to accelerate learning and deliver a comprehensive, rigorous education for every student, we have to make sure that we're highlighting inside of that innovative, transformational educational practices. And that's what competency-based education is. That's what you're here to learn more about today, that delivering a well-rounded, comprehensive, rigorous education means you're going to look at things like competency-based teaching and learning that actually works and delivers for students. So I think a lot of the strategies that you'll hear about today definitely align to what we identify and Raise the Bar in that agenda, because it's currently being implemented in districts and schools in every state. When I go across the country and I talk to districts and teachers and state leaders around what they're doing, they're working on academic acceleration. They're figuring out how to provide a more well-rounded education that includes arts education and early childhood education and STEM learning. And they're looking at making sure students with disabilities have what they need. This is what districts are doing, and public and private schools are already across the country incorporating competency-based education. We have great shining examples of that. The definition specifically of competency-based education, we know, includes, among other things, strategies that ensure equity for all students that are embedded in the culture, in the structures, and the pedagogy of the schools and the education system. That's why equity is at the heart of both competency-based education and what we're doing for Raise the Bar, because all students, not just some students, not just the majority of students, but all students deserve a high quality, comprehensive, rigorous, well-rounded education. And so when you're thinking about designing these equitable systems with, exquisite learning conditions, does instruction and learning look different under competency-based education? Yeah, of course it does. But our kids need that. And so the good news is that supporting and navigating those kinds of differences and nuances is available. It's free. And you can look to our very own regional educational laboratories, the RELs, that's sponsored by our own department's Institute of Education Sciences. They are providing technical assistance and resources. So if you're trying to dip your toe in or go all the way into the deep end with competency-based education to individual states who are seeking help, we have that with our RELs being available for you. So there's good examples out there. We want to see it for more, not less students, because it's working. So it makes sense. What we're doing today is bringing together the educators and the leaders so that we can talk about how do you implement this? How do we get the great positive impact that we see in some places when competency-based education is being fully implemented with fidelity? So you'll hear today's panelists have arrived at this competency-based education genuinely with their own seeking of knowledge and information. And they had to have a whole lot of introspection and reflection and put a lot of effort and dedication. They didn't just wake up and say, oh, here's the latest, greatest, newest thing in education. Let's just try to do it. They have come to know through their own firsthand knowledge and their own experiences that students don't learn in the same ways, nor at the same pace. And so how we teach each student has had to evolve to accommodate the realities and the differentiation of learners. We're going to unlock the genius and potential that I believe lies within each learner. We need to have a competency-based approach that really helps us unlock the genius of each and every learner. So I think the best way to raise the bar is when we have to know exactly where we're starting. Where is the bar right now? Do you know where your students are? You can look at Vygotsky's research on the zone of proximal development. That means where are your students in their learning? And what is their very next best step? If learning is too easy, it's a Goldilocks method, is a simpler way of saying Vygotsky's zone of proximal development is if it's too easy, they're not going to learn. If it's too hard, it's not going to learn. But where is the starting bar for each and every student so that we can ensure they develop the necessary proficiencies at the level that meets their next level of learning so that they can advance to the next level and they can achieve academic success and what that means for them. So I think it's our responsibility, our duty to ensure that students are advanced based on not just an opinion, but on evidence. We need evidence of mastery of content and skills, not just seat time. And that's foundational if we're going to deliver a comprehensive, rigorous education for all students. So I want to personally thank our panelists, Mark Siegel, Kareem Farah, and Dr. Jenny Gatto for sharing your experiences and all of your expertise with us today. So those that are wanting to learn more about how to do this can actually learn from practitioners and people who have spent a lot of time unpacking what this really means. So Maureen, thanks for bringing everyone together for this really important conversation, and let's raise the bar together.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. We appreciate learning that competency-based education also aligns with the administration's Raise the Bar initiative, and that the department's Institute for Education Sciences, or IES, is supporting regional educational laboratories across the country that have both resources and technical assistance to offer states and schools in this regard. At this time, I'm going to invite my panelists to turn on their video cameras, and you might have to click them on and off just to make sure you're on. And I'm going to introduce our first panelist. Notwithstanding the department's work in this area, I first came to learn about competency-based education, also referred to as proficiency-based, mastery-based learning, through our first speaker, Mark Siegel, assistant head of the Delphian School in Sheridan, Oregon. Among his many roles, he helps public and private schools transition to proficiency-based, student-centered school models. He travels the country advocating for proficiency-based education, urging the shift from factory model time-based schools to personalized, student-centered, and learner-paced programs. As Mark will share, from its founding, the Delphian School has been grounded in this education approach. Mark, I will turn the mic over to you.
Thank you. I am so excited. I can't tell you. And in my first slide, the first two slides just get to show you that the good news is that now all 50 states have some form of proficiency, mastery, competency happening in their programs. That is just fantastic. And you see here, Washington State has mastery-based learning right there on their website, and they're working on it every day. Some exciting news there. The next slide shows you that the whole state of Utah has this personalized competency-based learning, what they call PCBL, that's just absolutely fantastic. I was at their Magellan Summit last year, and to see all these different educators who are putting this into play. So I want to orient everyone, because you're going to hear some great, great people. And the next slide shows you what it's all about. This big shift is really from an old school concept that we all are still living with in many ways, where time is the constant. And when time is the constant, learning is the variable if it occurs at all. It doesn't work. What we're all telling you today is we're transforming our systems. So learning is the constant and time is the variable. That is just so important, where learning is the constant. You can't teach a class to drive a car. Each individual has to learn and master each step before going on. I'm going to introduce you to a report that you can download freely from the internet called Prisoners of Time. That's the next slide. And this was first introduced by the Commission on Time and Learning in, I think, 1994. Then it was reissued by the Education Commission of the States. And it's just a fabulous report. It's not long, but it just highlights why it's so important. You've already heard the Deputy Secretary already tell you all of this, but I just thought you'd like to see at least 3 key points. We'll go to the next slide, and you can see just some of the things that they said. I won't read this to you, but the point is that where time exists, in other words, teachers cover something once, as I said, it's no surprise that some students do reasonably well, but many other students are either bored or lost, and some aren't even there that day, and that lesson is lost to them. The next slide shows you that we've also used time as the most senior thing to think about, but 51 minutes for 180 days may not be appropriate for every subject. We need to give them the time that they need for the students to master and move on. And the strongest quote on the next slide really gets to me. I use it in every presentation. I tell everybody this. But the time available in the 6-hour day and the 180-day year is the unacknowledged design flaw in American education. And design flaws are the serious flaws. That's when the wheels fall off the cars. You know, we've got to fix that system. So one more point I'm going to show you, just briefly introduce you to Benjamin Bloom. We all know his work, but the next slide shows you that he wrote a paper called the 2 Sigma Problem, the search for methods of group instruction as effective as one-to-one tutoring. And I advise everybody to just download it. It's readable, it's easy. You just get it off the internet. But what he's saying is 30 to 1 is just not a good system. Tutoring one-to-one is a wonderful system. And his quest was, how can we develop a classroom model that approximates that one-to-one tutoring, that gold standard. So we don't need my slides anymore. I'm just going to talk to you. We'll get back to those. But the current model sort of tells us that one size fits all. And as the Deputy Secretary said, that doesn't work. You can't be told if you get it, fine. If not, tough luck. That's not a good model. In the resources you'll have available to you is Saul Kahn's talk, his TED talk, that really says it all in the title. He says, let's teach for mastery, not tests. And he makes a great case on the subject. It's really good. So when you think about it, what we have to do is teach students where they are, not where they should be. That just doesn't work. So the topic today is we're going to talk to you about implementing models that are optimum for students. And I thought that I would wrap up with telling you what I think are the 6 reasons that the shift to proficiency or mastery or competency is so important. Number 1, it increases student equity. Students need that equity to reach them where they are, and so they can master the material and then move on. The second reason is that in my experience over 50 years with this, students get a much deeper understanding and retention when they're working themselves with the material rather than just listening in a time-based system. They can take the time to dig in, to master, and where they got it, they can move right on. it also is much better for student motivation and engagement. When it's meeting them where they are, they get it and they feel better about it. They don't feel lost or bored or that they've missed something. From a teaching point of view, this is so effective when it comes to the use of instructional time because the teacher is free to work with individual students in any form of the program that you're going to see. And of course, what do we love? Student ownership and agency. It couldn't be better. And teachers love it because it's more satisfying. They see students getting it instead of being lost. It takes away the grading pressure because the mastery builds in itself how the students can assess themselves. And they have more time for quality feedback and for differentiated instruction. So I don't think any of us claim that our systems are perfect, but they're certainly much better than time-based systems. See how you can transform a classroom one lesson at a time, or how a whole school district can transform. And you remember my message, we've got to move to a system where learning is the constant and time is the variable. Thank you.
Mark, thanks so much. And we'll certainly be coming back to you with questions regarding stackable credentials and grades and GPAs. But next, I'd like to introduce Kareem Farah, former high school teacher and co-founder and CEO of Modern Classroom Project. As a high school teacher, instead of using the traditional lecture model, Kareem taught mathematics through a blended model where students access content through his self-made videos. The cornerstone of his classroom was the ability for students to work through their content at their own pace, and Kareem's ability to employ mastery-based grading to evaluate student learning. Worth noting, in 2018, Kareem received the DC Public Schools Award for Classroom Innovation and was featured in Edutopia and CBS News for his work. Before Kareem shares his story, we have a brief video, which includes Kareem, that focuses on what teaching and learning actually look like in a competency-based classroom. So I'm going to invite Michelle to bring up the video and just sit back and relax.
All right, folks. Hi, everybody. I'm Kareem, and I obviously was the person, one of the people in that video. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of the Modern Classrooms Project. I just want to give a brief kind of 10-minute build off of what Mark just shared and also what Maureen shared, and tell a little bit more about my story and sort of the role that I think and the perspective I bring to the table around competency-based learning. I created this organization out of my classroom in DC Public Schools with my co-founder. I think the perspective we have is a lot of times we hear about innovations like competency-based learning, personalized learning, blended learning. And the real challenge that we face nationally in schools and in districts is actually the final step of changing teacher practice. You'll see incredible sort of strategies built. You'll build buy-in amongst leaders. You'll create an environment where folks get really excited about bringing these innovations to life in classrooms. But we actually don't reach the final stage of scaling that type of change in classrooms and actually creating a world where educators feel like they have a pathway to actually pulling off a learning environment that allows them to grade students on competency, that actually creates that student-centered learning environment that's powerful. I was experiencing that challenge myself. I was an educator. I was going into my 4th year in the classroom. I was incredibly frustrated with the one-size-fits-all approach to instruction, the lecture style of teaching that really doesn't work for students. But I didn't feel like I had a pathway to actually redesign my classroom. And that's what sort of led to the creation of the model that you saw in that video. I want to start first on this slide, just talking about the limitations of traditional models of teaching. I don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but when I was teaching traditionally in those first 3 years as a high school math teacher, I'm delivering these live lectures. My on-grade level and present students are going, all right, I guess I'm ready for this, but they're frequently ready to move forward. There's the folks that say they've already learned it. They're bored, they're frustrated, they're ready to move on. I'm not meeting their needs, I'm not maximizing their potential. There's a huge percentage of students that have prior learning gaps that are lost and frustrated as I'm talking at them. And then another sizable percentage of students, about 30% of students across the country right now are experiencing chronic absenteeism who aren't actually in class. And I'm delivering a lesson that they're going to quote unquote miss, and then they're going to have to learn through a packet that I left in the front office. This model of instruction didn't work for me. You can go to the next slide. What also we know is that teacher burnout is on the rise nationally. And I think you'll hear a lot of sort of theories behind why educator burnout is increasing. I think the reality is the teaching profession is increasingly getting harder. Students' needs are wider, but also we're competing with a lot of distractions that take students' attention away from learning and puts it into kind of other environments. But more than anything, I think when educators don't have a pathway to achieve their core goal in the classroom, they're less inclined to stay. I often use the example of if a firefighter doesn't actually have the ability to put out fires, they're probably not going to stay as a firefighter. Well, most educators' primary goal is to differentiate instruction. And most educators don't actually have a pathway to do that with a high diversity of learning levels and social emotional needs. So when I think about the importance of competency-based learning, when I think about the importance of shifting instruction, it's not just because we need to build better learning environments for students, but it also is because we have to build an environment where educators have a pathway to success and feel like their job's actually sustainable, so we can actually change the narrative about the profession. You can go to the next slide. Now, the challenge that sort of we think about when we think about building classrooms that are personalized and competency-based, we think about this question of how do teachers design an effective learning experience when a high percentage of students they serve either didn't master the previous skill, are absent or late to class, struggle with emotional dysregulation, or have unique learning differences. And I think when I ask most folks whether the classrooms that they either support have a student population that looks like this, or when I ask teachers whether their students look like this, almost all of them say yes. But when we ask the question, are your classroom structures structured to support a student population like this? The answer is almost always no. So our goal needs to be to shift classrooms away from one size fits all model and one that actually meets the needs of student populations that look like this. You can go to the next slide. And I think one of the most important things we need to do, especially as we start to communicate with educators, is we need to move past buzzwords. Educators are tired of hearing buzzwords. They're tired of hearing things like competency-based learning or personalized learning, data-driven instruction, mastery-based grading, without actually getting any practical solutions. So I think what we present and what I tell almost every leader to think about is how can we actually provide true blueprints for educators that they can put into practice today, tomorrow, next month, or next year, as opposed to just focusing on the research and the big ideas. Because what we need is to see change now in classrooms in an evolutionary, not revolutionary way. You can go to the next slide. The slide change. We can go to the next slide. Mine's still on the same one. Maureen, is it just me where the slide hasn't changed?
I think we have a little technical difficulty, but just please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So in the next slide, you're going to see just an outline of what you saw in the video, which is the model that we actually run at the Modern Classrooms Project. And what I mainly want to talk about there is there's three core components for how we believe you can achieve competency-based learning. The first step is you've got to eliminate our reliance on live lecturing. The primary reason that most educators never actually achieve mastery-based learning is that they actually ask the question, like, how could I possibly do this when all my students are learning the same thing at the exact same time? So the first thing you actually need to do is break free from live lectures. The second thing that allows you to do is actually unleash a self-paced learning environment. And once you've achieved self-paced learning, the idea of creating a mastery-based or competency-based learning environment is actually much easier than we all think. And this can be done in any content area or in any grade level. You can go to the next slide. So the first component of this for us is blended instruction. That means eliminating live lectures. And I noticed John Bergman was in the chat, who's one of the pioneers of flipped learning. And this is where flipped learning can really come into play, which is the idea that instead of teachers delivering direct instruction live at the front of the room, all delivered to the same set of students at the same time, teachers in our classrooms actually build little bite-sized videos. 9 minutes or under, ideally 6, really crisp instructional videos that ensure that students can access the content anytime, anywhere, but actually frees that educator up from being at the front of the room delivering that live lecture. You can go to the next slide. Once educators are no longer delivering those live lectures, that's what creates the ability for students to be learning at their own pace. You no longer are required to have every single student on the exact same skill at the exact same time. From there, you should really self-pace in chunks. You don't want students to be self-pacing for a whole year at a time or 6 months at a time. And our classrooms are usually self-pacing for 1 to 2 weeks at a time. And you actually have lesson classifications. So you might have, must do, should do, and aspire to do lessons to create this framework where some students are mastering all the lessons in a particular scope of or a unit, whereas other students are only mastering the must-do skills. You can go to the final slide, or second to last slide. And this really allows for that final frontier, which is the purpose of this webinar today, which is mastery-based learning or competency-based learning. Once students have the ability to be at different spots in a learning sequence, well, now you can finally introduce competency-based learning, where a student actually has to demonstrate their understanding of a skill before they move on to the next one. And the educator can actually intervene when they don't demonstrate that understanding and engage in a data-driven one-on-one and small group instruction, address the misconception, and move that forward. And that's the kind of final component of our model. You can go to the last slide. The last thing I want to say here is, we've seen 2 big impacts when we see our model deployed. And I think you would see this in any model that effectively brings personalized competency-based learning to life. The first is true differentiation. When we took control teachers and modern classroom teachers in the same schools and buildings, we saw that control teachers felt like only 19% of them felt like they could work closely with students during class. 86% of our educators felt like they could do that. That is ultimately our prime objective here, to maximize the amount of time educators can spend working with students one-on-one and in small groups, actually cultivating and nurturing competency. But the other piece is we found that our educators actually enjoyed the profession more. And that's that kind of dual impact you want to see. You want to see students learning, but you also want to see a world where educators feel like they can stay in the profession longer. So that's my kind of brief overview. Thanks so much for the time. And I know that we'll be answering some questions later. I'll kick it back to you, Maureen.
Thanks so much, Kareem. I think if I had had you as a math teacher, I probably could have done calculus. All right. So we've heard from Mark, this private school leader, and we've heard from a teacher, and authentic and raw, because Kareem was right in the classroom. And I think as teachers reflect on their teaching and instruction, and they're seeing whatever I'm doing isn't working, it propels them to certainly change up the game and to change and to think about other ways of doing this. And Kareem, you've done it successfully, and thank you for sharing your story. Now we are going to hear from Dr. Jenny Gatto, Deputy Superintendent of Westminster Public Schools in Colorado. After 12 years of service in a small rural school district, she followed her passion to help lead the implementation of an authentic competency-based system. She will share how education leaders can implement competency-based education within and across school systems. But before Dr. Gatto speaks, we have another short video clip to share with you about Westminster Public Schools' competency-based system. And we'll go ahead and we'll pull up the video.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Jenny Gatto, as Maureen mentioned. I'm currently serving as Deputy Superintendent for Westminster Public Schools, but I have the absolute honor of moving into the superintendency role for our system on July 1st, 2024. I joined the district 15 years ago, specifically for my belief in this work, that competency-based education is the absolute best to achieve what our Deputy Secretary Martin spoke about, raising the bar and leading the world. We try to share with anyone interested, so that even as some of my colleagues here have spoken about, how do we shepherd this way of educating our children along? Since that time, since joining the district, I've been a big part of developing our proficiency scales, a true competency-based instructional model, a recording and reporting system called Empower that is student-centric, that builds on evergreen data that stays in the system over time to make this system possible. And I'm excited just to share a little bit about our journey that has been going on for the past 15 plus years. So to begin with, Westminster Public Schools is located in Colorado. We're a first ring suburb right in between Denver and Boulder. We serve about 8,000 students, as you can see here on the screen, with a significant majority falling into that free and reduced lunch category, and also representing a very diverse set of backgrounds, which we embrace and love. Our structure, right now we have about 16 schools, and over the course of probably the past 5 or 6 years, we've really tried to move to transitioning away from the traditional elementary and middle school. We still have a few of those because we believe in choice. But we've moved to one comprehensive high school and more PK8s, as we believe that structure is not mandatory, but very supportive of the competency-based system, as the right resources and the right staff, highly qualified staff, are in place to meet the individual needs of students. Next slide. So over the past 15 years, our approach to a personalized competency-based education system has continuously evolved. Drawing from the groundbreaking work of the Reinventing Schools Coalition, RISC, back, I believe it was in the early 2000s, we've developed now our model, our Westminster Learning Model, which you can see here on the screen, which is based on 5 key components and 4 guiding tenets. So just to quickly go through those: shared vision, which provides a system for input and communication, strategic planning, honors the diversity, and our goal is to build the love of learning in every one of our students. Leadership is the next component, which if Dr. Swanson was here with us today, our current superintendent, she'd talk about leadership at all levels. And she has a whole set of cabinets. We often joke with her that she's got a kitchen full of cabinets, where we know it's so important that we look at every single individual in the system as a leader and a piece of this implementation. And so Dr. Swanson has student cabinets and parent cabinets and teacher cabinets, and not just the instructional side. She also has a support services cabinet where ESP and our maintenance and operation teams are also a part of this, which plays into one of those tenets that I'll talk about in a minute. The next piece is our competency-based design, which for us is defined by a well-defined set of standards, which for us are proficiency scales, which exist preschool through 12th grade. I think that's one of the systemic pieces in our system. Is it's not one school, it's not one grade level, and it's not just a couple content areas. That PK-12, across every content area in the system, we have proficiency scales. We record and report in a competency-based way. So those proficiency scales are the backbone of all of the work that we do. Next is our aligned assessments. We have a competency-based instructional model that we've worked very closely with Dr. Marzano on developing the recording and reporting system Empower that I referenced earlier, and then a very strategic smart scheduling model that even has evolved just in the past 2 years as a result of the pandemic and the learnings from the Katrina research around just-in-time teaching. And so that's also a really key piece of making this system work. Next, we have a continuous improvement model in the system. And if we step back 12 years ago, or in 2012, that 1 year alone, I think we made 17 adjustments in the system. So you have to be agile and know we don't have all of the answers right now. And that's something you have to be crystal clear with our staff at all levels around. Some of this we are going to figure out and allow people to fail forward. The next component is all of these 4 major components work dynamically to create and support a true learner-centered classroom, which is the ultimate goal, to build and provide opportunities for students to have agency and engagement in the work and play a pivotal role in that classroom. Around the outside of our model are those guiding tenets, which everything we do is systemic and systematic, all grounded in a personalized delivery model. And as Mark referenced, really key foundational tenets are learning matters most, time matters least. It still matters, that time piece. And as we get to high school, it matters a little bit more because we all have visions in our head of what high school should look like and what the K-12 system should look like. But we have to allow students in those early years to have the time to get deep understanding of those crucial pieces that are building blocks to their future. In the leadership piece, I just want to point out one more thing that has been crucial in sustaining this for over 15 years at this point. And it's a very intentional succession planning by our Board of Education and current superintendent, that we have a variety of different models in place around an aspiring leaders program. So how do we ensure you're not stepping into the principalship for the very first time and you're learning how to be a principal, you're learning how to take that helm, and you're trying to learn what this competency-based system is. So we have a grow your own model that our chief of staff has built called our Aspiring Leaders Program, which helps produce that next set, provides us bench strength for the future. Another piece is this is very different than what we learned, how we learned in school. And so teachers coming in, we do everything we can with our local universities to get as many student teachers as possible. So we have some time with them before they take on their classroom that very first year, that we've had them in the system. And so Regis University is right down the street from us, and we try and take every student teacher they have and often offer them contracts even in December. So succession planning is another key piece of how we've been able to sustain this over time. Slide 3. So this is really work at that very top level. So our Board of Education has been instrumental in guiding and leading our competency-based system. Since 2012, they've annually adopted a resolution of support, which you can see our most recent version here on the screen. We just actually went through a board majority election. And the first thing the board decided to do is in January of 2024, recommit to this is the work. And they approved the resolution of support for the 2024 year. And every year, we have the very first version from 2012 up until this year, and they change slightly every year based on the evolving focus of our system. But that signals to everyone internally and externally, this is the work we're doing and it's what we're committed to. The other tool that you see up here on the screen is a piece of work that was created both on the instructional and non-instructional side of the house in defining our mission, vision, and operating principles, which culminated into what we have as we agree statements. And as you're going through this work, every single day you're going to turn over, still 15 years in, we're turning over rocks within the model that we really didn't think about. How do you deal with this in this specific situation? And so those we agrees are so important for us to point to and say, if not this, then what? This is our grounding principle. This is what we agreed to. And it just gives you that touchstone that sometimes is needed when you're in those turbulent waters. Next slide. So this really is the proof in the pudding. The efficacy of our shared leadership and competency-based system is evident in this, what we believe is a remarkable turnaround. In 2009, 2010, our first year of implementation, we were a turnaround district in our state accreditation model. 7 of our schools were in turnaround status. And over the course of our implementation and the dedication and hard work of our leaders, our teachers, our students, and a testament to the competency-based system, we removed all schools from turnaround status, and the district came off the state accountability clock back in 2018. And even through the pandemic, you can see we maintain that status and continue to show high growth for all of our students, based on some strong partnerships with Dr. Marzano, Scott Bacon from Empower, and Cognia as our external accrediting agency. Slide 5. And finally, just another piece of that leadership piece and how this is how we do work inside the school district. So our Board of Education adopted their new strategic plan called Destination 2030 back in January of 2023. And you can see it's all about continuous improvement. You can see some of their short, midterm, and long-term goals around what was referenced in the video as a high reliability schools framework. We took that Marzano and Phil Warwick work and said, we have to make it our own. And that's something I would recommend to everybody on this call. When you're embarking on this, find friends, find partners that are doing this work. But I'll caution about ever trying to take somebody's proficiency scales or somebody's model. You have to involve those directly effective in all of this work. Take the time as district leaders to align the disparate tools that you might have in your system and make it speak your language. So what we did with the published high reliability schools framework is crosswalked it to all the external tools, our state documents, the Cognia tools. We were giving our principals so many different frameworks that today you're beholden to this and tomorrow you're beholden to a different one. And it became very fragmented. So we took the time to align 7 different guiding documents that were in front of our teachers and our principals, align them all into one, which is what we call our high reliability schools framework. The Marzano version has 25 indicators, ours has 29 to address all the things, and principals now have one framework that guides everything. They never have to look at another document. And that is all documented in our Board of Education strategic plan that says by the end of the 2024 school year, every school in this district will have achieved HRS level 2. By 2027, 85% of schools will achieve the top level of 5. And then by 2030, we'll be at 100%. Also honoring schools are in different places, communities are in different places. But we now know this is the target and what our board expects of us. So in conclusion, it's important that you as district leaders, school leaders take the charge. There might be legislation that you have to step in front of and be that advocate for your system and for competency-based in general, and try and clear away those barriers that are maybe in front of your teams to be able to do the right work for our kids. Thanks for giving us a little bit of time today to share our story, and we're always open. We do some site visits throughout the year to allow people to see this in action within our classrooms.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gatto, and thanks to all of the panelists. We're going to begin to accept questions and entertain questions from our audience. Please feel free to insert them in the chat room. But I suspect one question you might have, you've heard references to various resources today, and one reference we're going to drop into the chat room is a wonderful PDF that is a maybe 4-page snapshot of competency-based education that was developed through one of our regional educational laboratories. And through that particular resource, you can click on to a number of other resources and also learn more about our regional educational laboratories and the work that they are doing on behalf of states who have requested the regional educational laboratories to provide technical assistance and guidance in this regard. We also have a more robust 1-page document of books, videos, research studies that we think you would find informative and helpful as you might be considering how you move either your classroom, your educational system, your entire school to competency-based education. That particular document, we will not be able to drop it in the chat room just because of security and firewalls, but we are committed to emailing that to all of you who participated in today's webinar. We will email that document to you because we have your email addresses, and that we should be able to complete within the next couple of days. If by any chance you don't receive that, please just email onpe@ed.gov. That's onpe@ed.gov, and we'll make sure you get that. And I want to thank the panelists for assisting with providing the resources that we included in that PDF. Before we go to questions, I just have a couple that I wanted to ask our panelists today. And Mark, I'm going to start with you. As I understand it, you don't in your school have, quote, grades per se. And we've also had a conversation, well, what about grade point averages? I mean, students want that, don't they? And parents need it. And what about the schools? Could you speak a little bit to how that is addressed in a competency-based system?
Sure. Well, there's a wide range of solutions, and while we will, until the whole world changes and they can understand a correct transcript, like we're working with the Mastery Transcript Consortium. What happens for our students, they study, are using study guides and other aspects of our program, and then they take a final examination and they restudy what they missed, so they don't leave without 100% proficiency. So grades play no part in our day-to-day operation. But there's a whole range you can read to Grading for Equity, but it certainly is a nutty system to begin with. Tom Guskey's book, On Your Mark, and so forth, So I'll stop giving my opinion, but for all of us, we think grading is just not the important part. It's the mastery, it's the love of learning, it's the more intrinsic value.
Thank you, Mark. Kareem, I have a question for you. When I think back to my teacher days, and I made little learning centers, and I spent hours reviewing papers, and I'm thinking, well, as a teacher now I have to develop these videos, and I've got a video camera. And what are some of the essential supports that you believe you have found that teachers need to be able to provide for a competency-based education within their classroom in ways that they don't feel overwhelmed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think at the end of the day, anytime a teacher is going to fundamentally redesign the way that their classroom operates, they're going to feel overwhelmed. So I think being honest about what it takes to transform a classroom, a school, or a district is first incredibly important. I also think in general, there's a lot of value in taking an opt-in approach in the early stages. You know, if you went to a school tomorrow or a district and you said everybody's going to teach in this way and it was pretty innovative and disruptive, there's going to be so many folks that will push back just at the thought that their classrooms need to change that rapidly, that it's going to be very hard to build the inertia necessary to move things forward. Whereas if you start with a pilot group, there's kind of two benefits to that. A, you're going to find the coalition, the willing, who are eager to do this. They maybe have already done 20, 30, 40, 60, 70% of this work on their own kind of journey, innovating and iterating in their classrooms. And then they kind of put the final touches and can actually implement. When they do that, it sets the stage for their peers, right? It creates examples for them to come into to then work off of. It actually creates the conditions for which their peers can build off of some of the resources they've already created, whether it be systems for grading, whether it be systems to track students' progress, whether it be, planning techniques and strategies that leverage the tools that the district has already invested in. So that is, I think, critical. Lastly, I think, when teachers can do this in teams, it's really powerful as well. We have seen this model scale with individual educators who do it by themselves, one teacher, an entire school, and they do incredible work. But we've definitely seen that the educators who feel like they have the best conditions, you have 2-3 educators teaching the same subject, for example, who are collectively planning. And when a school leader or a district can even offer them supplemental planning time, that can be really powerful. What we find is the educators know that when they strike the balance, when they pull it off, it's pretty durable in that their classrooms are now changed not just for this unit or for next unit, but actually for years to come, especially if there isn't major shifts to what they teach. And that, I think, is part of the reason why once they start winning, seeing the successes, they're eager to figure it out and kind of nail it because they know that it's actually going to pay dividends in the long run. So those are some of the things I would mention. But at the end of the day, it's hard work, and you can't lie about that because the teachers will find out very quickly.
Absolutely. When I was a school principal, I had a event where you could bid on being like a teacher for the day. And I thought this would be wonderful because a parent or somebody who belonged to the school could come in and they would see, and we're not talking competency-based education, just general education, just how challenging it is. And then to do it very well, and then to do it so well that students actually master material. Absolutely. Dr. Gatto, I have a question for you now. This happens in education, and people will say, here we go again. Here we go, just another idea about how to improve education. If we wait long enough, it'll go away. How would you respond to that? And what evidence might you bring to bear that, oh no, this is not going away?
I think we earn that. I think as leaders, we've often kind of had the flavor of the year. And I believe the shared visioning process that was done in this district back, honestly, before first implementation in 2009, that starting in around, I believe it was 2007, our current superintendent, our chief academic officer that just stepped away last year in retirement, that they went out on a listening tour and they sat in schools. Sometimes one parent came, but they worked with teachers, they worked with parents, they did that shared visioning together to say, is this what we want to do? And the decision was, unless we had 85% of staff on board with this is the direction we're moving, that we weren't going to move forward with it. And the first vote of staff system-wide did not come through at 85%. So they said, well, we're not going to move forward, that we needed that kind of commitment because we know we've done that in education. And so it was actually teachers that said, wait a minute, let's not drop this yet. There was enough belief back then. We had a burning platform. We knew we could and needed to do better for our kids. And so they said, give us some time with our colleagues. And they went out and had meetings, said, you know, administrators, you stay out of the rooms. And they sat with teachers and just said, what is it? What's holding you back? And it was really just, they needed more information. And there wasn't a ton back in 2009 when we were starting down this path. There wasn't a lot of research around this. But it was teachers were like, we're willing to do this. It was just, there was some lingering questions and we were just honest. I think Kareem spoke to this. You got to be honest with them. It is more work. We've got it pretty efficient as I think it can be at this point, but it is more. And I think just that honesty, always keeping them with you, listening all through the process to say, we know here's some pain points. And we involve our teachers and our staff in proficiency scale development, in the instructional model components. So keeping them close, that shared leadership model, I think is what has sustained this work and helped them understand this isn't going to go away. That district leadership with our Board of Education, always committing to the work. And I think one group that I haven't talked about is our Westminster Education Association. Our union has been arm in arm with the Board of Education and the superintendent all along the way to make sure we were listening from their angle about what supports do we need to put in place to make this possible. We're not perfect. The system's not perfect yet, but we're always listening and involving those most directly affected.
Thank you. And we know through some of the resources we have and research that has been conducted that competency-based learning has had significant positive effects on student learning outcomes and also their approach and attitude towards learning also. One of the questions that's in the chat room I'm going to raise, and the individual wrote that it appears or it looks like the students come to school and they spend the day on computers working at their own pace through predetermined assignments. Is this what it essentially looks like? And before you answer that, if you could add to that, some might criticize, oh, they're just making the kids be on computers all day, and then the teacher has a little checklist. Could you speak to this question? All three of you can, and maybe I'll start with Mark on this one, and then we'll go to Kareem, and then Dr. Gatto. And then also say, outside of technology, what are the other things they're working on? Mark?
Sure. Well, since we started in 1974 and opened in 1976, there were no computers. So we do not even, ours is not computer embedded because we've actually don't even use the lecture method because there's lots of ways we can implement this program. So it's just not a problem for us. These are very active studies the students are involved in. So the answer is no, because we never developed it that way. Computers can be used as resources. So I'll stop. All of us could talk forever. It is so hard to compact all of our thoughts. But the exciting thing is there's so much literature. There's so many organizations. And Jenny and Kareem, any of us will help anyone because it's the right thing.
I'll add from the classroom experience that, the technology is designed not to be the primary lever for which students are learning. It's designed to be a tool to unleash teacher capacity and ensure that students have had limited access to information, right? So like an instructional video is designed to be 9 minutes. Walked into one of our modern classrooms. Now, if on that day students are actually writing a paper, well, they're not writing it by hand, in 11th grade if you have computers. So yeah, there's going to be a bunch of kids on computers, but they're not compliantly staring at a screen, watching an instructional video and then clicking a bunch of buttons. The videos are usually these kind of short bursts of information that students access. And then a lot of the activities in the work are done paper and pencil in an interactive way. When the computer is necessary, they go on the computer. When it's not necessary, they don't go on a computer. With that being said, I think the comment actually specifically outlines ineffective implementation. I think we have to be honest about what ineffective implementation of personalized, self-paced, competency-based learning does look like. I mean, if you take a look at some of these very large-scale ed tech solutions, yes, you can walk into classrooms and see a bunch of kids staring at screens, kind of trying to figure out this quasi gamified learning experience that doesn't actually cultivate learning. So everyone should be cognizant of the fact that when you scale learning models like this, a downside or an ineffective implementation can look at an enormous amount of screen time and sort of compliance-based navigating through learning platforms. But that's not what high quality learning experience looks like when it's competency-based and personalized. Certainly not what I saw in the Westminster video, and hopefully not what folks saw in the Edutopia video. And I think that's what we're ultimately trying to achieve.
I think one thing I can point out to this is, as I mentioned, we do a lot of site visits, and we used to schedule two, one in the morning, and then we'd switch schools and send our visitors to a different school. And after the first couple attempts at that, our visitors would walk into classrooms and they're like, well, this looks very much like a regular classroom, because good instruction is good instruction. So much of the competency-based system is what happens in the background to create the right groupings of students that sets that teacher up for success and therefore the students up for success. The systems that you use to know, so teachers know differentiated instruction. Today, these 7 kids need this, when whole group versus small group versus personalized, individualized instruction is happening. So it supports the planning side of things, but our kids may be on computers at some time, some centers might be, because another big difference is when we're just using a textbook and we're going page to page. At the end of the chapter, we take a test, kids get their scores, they go in the traditional system, they get all averaged up all nice, and then we move on to the next chapter. And in this system, if the student didn't get it, we track that data at such a granular level that the teacher knows this student's going to need another dose of this, whether it's through cumulative learning processes. And sometimes that's when we might leverage some of those external subscription-based tools. So kids might be getting another dose. But we always, we lean on our teachers that they are the first best instruction, and a computer should never be that instruction. But when our people come in, we quit going to the second site, because then they just want to talk about how'd you get all of this in place, because it looks very much like a traditional classroom. Good instruction, just not in rows.
Great. And we have like 2 minutes left. I do have a closing remark, but Dr. Gatto, I'm going to give you this question. One of the our participants asked about, how does this translate to the college advising space? How does it support high school students who want to attend college? I'm sure we could spend lots of time on that, but even just a little soundbite there from you regarding that question.
So there's a misnomer about, because we don't use letter grades, that it's not a graded system. We can tell you when we say we don't use any percents, but if in a traditional system, Mark got a 89% in the class and he has a B, and I got a 90% in the class and I have an A. Those percentage-based systems, there's no way, you don't know what a kid knows and doesn't. What gave Mark a B and me an A? In our system, we track at that granular level. We don't bring percentages that might skew information. We score on a 4-point scale on every one of those proficiency scales. Those come together to figure out a course or a level final score of a 3.5 or a 4, which in a traditional system, you translate that A to a 4.0 because you have to figure out a GPA, a class rank. We just eliminate the middleman. We never put an ABC on it. We have 4.32s, and those create that final GPA, which then goes on a transcript. So we absolutely can translate this into the college world. And as we've talked to universities and colleges, they already tell you they get every letter in the alphabet as grades on transcripts. They get kids from different countries, different states, different districts. They all do it different anyways. It's just taking the time to create translation tools to help them understand the system.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you for responding to that question. And I'm sorry, participants, we don't have more time, but I want to thank our panelists today, beginning with, first with Deputy Secretary Cindy Martin. Thank you for joining us. Mark Siegel, Kareem Farah, and Dr. Gatto. I know you are extraordinarily busy and with very challenging schedules and workload, that you took time, in mind you, for the webinar participants. We've been planning this for a couple months and they have been involved in all of that. I also want to give a shout out to Michelle Velez Anderson and Janae Morrissey, Pamela Allen, and Isidore Binder on my team for supporting me. They're in the background making sure everything can work right, so that I don't have to worry about that. Again, for those of you who want to learn more about this, we're going to send you the PDF with a lot of wonderful resources. And finally, in closing, for the panelists, for all of you participating who are involved with educating our nation's children. We know that you work hard daily, that you make sacrifices on behalf of your students, many of which are never known. Please know from the U.S. Department of Education, we are sending you a huge thank you, and we seek to support you in that effort. And we so thank you for joining us today. Take care, and may the rest of your school year be filled with joyful rewards as you see your children advance academically, socially, emotionally. And again, thank you for joining us today.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.